all we do here, which is really talk about the business of restaurants. We're not talking so much about the cuisine, although I'm very curious to get into bread making, which I'm sure you'll talk to us a little bit about today. So, welcome.
Thanks, Will. Glad to be here with you.
Can you tell me a little bit about the origin of Bob, your name, and also just really your family background and how you came to the studio here in Santa Barbara?
Well, okay, let me think about that question. The origin of Bob's Well Bread really started when I was baking and we lived in Los Angeles, and we were calling it well bread in LA, meaning if I was baking out of my house in LA or baking out of my house in Los Alamos, that it would always be LA. We morphed that out into Bob's Well Bread ultimately, just because it had a better feeling about it.
Well, what got you into this? Because your history is not related to the food business and the restaurant
No,
business.
not at all. My history was really in the entertainment business. I was most recently head of worldwide marketing for Sony Pictures Television, launching TV shows all over the world, but primarily responsible for shows like Seinfeld and um, Dr. Oz and soaps and game shows, Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, things like that. And I was downsized out of my position at Sony about now 12 years ago, in 2010, 2011. And I started baking because we had a wood fired oven in our backyard in Hancock Park. And um, just one thing led to another. And I started making bread from the Tartine cookbook by Chad Robertson. And that really resonated with me. And I started giving the bread away to people, and they loved it. And I decided that life didn't need to be about doing the entire life of the same exact thing. So I went to San Francisco and studied at the San Francisco Baking Institute over a couple of years' time there. Concurrently started working on a business plan to create a bakery and cafe and what was that going to entail. And had to talk my wife into moving from Los Angeles up to the Central Coast to actually complete this.
Well, going back to the beginning, you came to California, or were you a native Californian, or did you?
No, I'm a native New Yorker. Grew up out
So
on
you're a
Long,
transplant,
yep, grew up on Long Island, or as we say, Long
Long
Island.
Island.
Um, moved to California to get into the television business, though, when I got out of college,
In
1980.
1980.
Yeah.
So then you landed in this, world called entertainment. Did you have any direction at that point that you wanted to be in marketing or you wanted to be in concept development or
No, I had
what
a
happened
business
there?
degree and a major in marketing, and I knew that I wanted to work in marketing in the business.
And where did that initially take you as a grunt? I mean, when you first got in.
As a grunt, it took me to NBC, where I was training to be a unit manager, which is really more of a financial liaison between the network and the shows that got produced there. So I was collecting and balancing costs for shows like The Tonight Show and Days of Our Lives and anything that was shot on the sound stages at the network. But that really wasn't my passion. I wasn't an accounting major.
It doesn't sound to me
It
like it's
wasn't
too
my thing,
granular for.
but it just got
Yeah.
me into the business, and I networked around a lot, which is how I met somebody that worked for Norman Lear, and I got an interview there to be manager of advertising and promotion, working on, this is 1980, 81 ish, working on all the classic Norman Lear situation comedies.
So you're in your young 20s, your early 20s, and you
Yes, that's
land this.
that's kind. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, you were a youngster,
I was young.
but you landed someplace really cool.
I landed
How's
a
that?
dream job that was great, and I stayed with that organization until Norman and his partners sold what was then called Embassy Communications, because they had purchased Avco Embassy Pictures along the way, and they changed the name of the company to Embassy Television. But they sold the company to the Coca-Cola company, which at the time owned Columbia Pictures.
And that was TriStar
That
also?
was Columbia TriStar at the
Got it.
time, right? So Embassy got subsumed into this larger organization. Thinking that I was going to be out of a job, I jumped and went to Paramount Pictures to work in their TV division. Um, but actually, what ended up happening was the Embassy executives took over the Columbia executives. So, maybe I should have stayed. I don't know.
But that got you more into the whole marketing niche,
Yeah, I got more into
not
marketing
into
there.
the creative so much as the marketing
I just
aspect of the creative.
I went full bore into marketing, and I stayed in marketing in television for the next 30 years.
Well, what's very clear now, today, if anybody goes to Bob's Well Bread in Los Alamos and Ballard, and hopefully more stores, as we'll talk about later,
Yeah.
is the marketing prowess. Because that's really what captured my imagination. I had never heard of you. I
And
one
now
day
you're wearing my sweatshirt.
I'm wearing the sweatshirt. Can you see that, folks who are out there in, YouTube land? Otherwise, the podcasters can see my wonderful logo that says, well, it doesn't say Bob's Well Bread. It's
Nope,
what
just an icon.
and what's the icon represent?
The icon is the center part, the trident, the fork with three prongs, is my great grandmother's Victorian bread fork. She came over from Russia at the end of the 19th century with her brothers and sisters, and this was part of her flatware pattern. It was a bread fork that was used to serve yourself a piece of bread or a dinner roll when the platter came around. So you pierced it and put it on your plate. I guess it preceded tongs. I don't know.
But it's certainly a branding
Yeah, and
component, right?
when we were launching the bakery and developing the logo itself, I wanted something that could easily be put on sweatshirts and caps and wine glasses.
You're
and
like the
coffee
Hard Rock
mugs.
Cafe of bakeries.
Well, it's just, I believe in the power of a brand.
And that's your marketing background,
Yes.
getting right back to where you started.
Yes, getting back to where I started.
And you've reinvented yourself now as this extraordinary baker. I mean, do you think of yourself as a baker, or is there someone else on your team that's, quote, the baker?
I've got a head baker named Scott Smith who's been with me for the last 5 or 6 years, and he's amazing. And
What's his background?
his background is baking. I mean, he's been in bakeries for probably 25 plus years.
How'd you find him?
Through a headhunter.
Okay.
I had a previous head baker that was with me for several years that was ready to move on, and we live in a really small town, so it's not like I can put a sign in the window, head baker wanted. So Scott was sent to me by a head hunter in the restaurant business, whom you may know, named Brad Metzger,
Yes.
and
We might have Brad on the show one day
Okay.
talking about,
I'll phone in. No, but Brad had
the merits of
Brad had
headhunting
actually
in the
given
restaurant
me
business.
my second head baker, who lasted for several years, and then got me Scott. My first head baker only lasted a couple of weeks because I was doing much of the baking at that time, but he was a bad person.
We don't like bad people. We like good people. That's why I'm with Bob Oswaks.
Yeah.
Here we are. So, Bob, my first experience with you was traveling to my hometown of San Francisco from my new hometown, Ojai. And this was probably back in 2014 that I discovered this little town called Los Alamos on my way up to San Francisco, right off the 101, because I had heard a little bit about the food scene, which was starting to sprout up,
Yeah.
and this place called Bob's Well Bread. So I had to go into that spot, and lo and behold, it's really cool. And breakfast is extraordinary. And it's not just about the bread and the pastry, except it is about the bread and the pastry. And it just blew my mind that you were lying out the door
Yes.
in this tiny little town. How many
Yes.
people live in Los Alamos? 1,000,
In that range.
right?
But because you're right off the freeway, it's an easy on and
If
easy
you know
off.
about it, you could
If you
blink,
know about it, you could blink and you'd pass it.
right?
Yeah.
But it's grown up in the San Ynez Valley as being a
It's the
go-to spot.
northernmost town within the San Ynez Valley. You've got Buellton, Solvang, Ballard, San Ynez, Los Olivos, and Los Alamos. So there are these 6 towns, Los Alamos being the northernmost point right off the freeway. Everything else you get to from side streets going around the valley.
So what happened? You said, I'm done with L.A., and you have a child, right? 2 children?
We
One
have a
child?
grown daughter.
You have a grown daughter.
When we moved up to the
You
valley,
and your wife, Jane.
my wife Jane, yes. So we bought a house in Los Alamos, of all places, about 20 years ago. I'd gotten
Oh.
a big,
This guy's a forerunner, folks. I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
no, we'd gotten a sizable bonus for Seinfeld, and I just said, let's buy a little
Oh, a little
place.
show called Seinfeld that you were involved with.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And we set out to look for a little weekend house, not thinking about Los Alamos, but we kept seeing this little Victorian farmhouse on a half an acre in Los Alamos, and every time we go wine tasting, the flyer would still be in the real estate office window. So one time I just called the real estate agent and said, can I get to see that house? And she goes, you know where Los Alamos is? And I said, no. And it was really just one exit beyond Los Olivos on the freeway. So we drove up there one day and saw the house, and the owner was a sort of garagiste winemaker, and
Garagiste. Now, I'm a lay guy. Garagiste.
French for very small production, and this is
Like 10 bottles.
yeah. Well, he had his 2-car garage filled with
Got it.
barrels.
It was a hobby.
Yeah, there's a festival called the Garagiste Festival, which is about small batch winemakers, really.
Garagiste Festival. My French is getting better. Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, we started doing some barrel samplings in his garage.
What's not to sample, right?
And next thing you know, we'd bought a house. So,
And it's all
good
history.
ploy on his part. But.
So then you're in Los Alamos.
Yeah, it was just a weekend place. We'd go on weekends for many, many years.
You had no thought that you were going to be doing any business here.
No. And at the time, Los Alamos was this sleepy little town with tumbleweeds going down the street. It was before Bell's, before Bell Street Farm, before Flatbread, before Casa Dumet's, before
These
the
are all
Skyview.
big name places
Before
now.
everything that is now part of this destination of Los Alamos, there was nothing but a cute little house in a sleepy little town.
So you're going back and forth between L.A. and Los Alamos.
Right. But over the years, things came into town. Clark Staub started Full of Life Flatbread. Sonia came in with Casa Dumet's, and Jesper was at Cafe Quackenbush, and there was,
Cafe Quackenbush.
Cafe Quackenbush was there for many years, breakfast and lunch place.
Were there enough people to support these new endeavors? Or were tourists starting to then flock in
The
from
tourists
the wine
really,
country?
Yeah, wine country tourists really what pushed it into being a full-time town.
But it wasn't the Solvang Danish, people that
No.
were coming in.
No, not at all.
It's more sophisticated travelers
Ultimately,
who had
yes.
a palate.
Once more places came in, I credit Clark with being the pioneer of opening up Full of Life Flatbread in a town like that. But, as more things came in, it became less of a risk, although everybody told me when I was getting ready to open a bakery, it's like, you sure you want to do it there? Are you sure you're going to be able to sustain several days a week, ultimately 5 days a week and all that? And you're right off the freeway, but you're not going to get people, and really think twice about it. And all those people now have obviously eaten those words.
Well, the real estate had something to do with this also. So tell me about the building that you're actually in.
Well, we had our eyes and our hearts set on this particular building. It's an old gas station from the turn of the 20th century.
People love that.
Yeah, it was a gas station that had been after it was a gas station and there was like 30 cabins on there. So in the turn of the century, probably only went 100 miles on a tank of gas. So you drive, you sleep, you eat, and you go to your next destination, however far you can get.
Now you must have a supercharger on the property.
We do have a charger, yeah.
There you go.
But when we found the building, it had been a biker bar that was closed for at least a dozen years.
Perfect.
Called Ghost Riders. And we set out to think that this would be a great place for a small country bakery cafe right in the heart of the wine country.
So what else is on the property in addition to the main building? I think
We've got a fruit orchard.
A fruit orchard.
We've got
cottages.
Cottages. We have 2 Airbnb rentals that we do, very nice traveler business with on weekends especially. And then we've got, tons of seating out there. So during the pandemic, for 2 years, we had nobody inside the bakery eating at all, but yet we're sitting there on a half an acre of land. So we had enough room for everyone to sit outside. And being blessed to be in the Central Coast in California, it became something that would work year round.
So then you bought this property. How long had you been in your home prior to buying this property and saying to Jane, you know what, I think I want to open up the bakery here?
Well, we'd had the house. We didn't live there yet. We were still living in LA. We had the house since 2000. This is 2010. So we'd been around Los Alamos for 10 years. We knew the valley. I knew I wanted to be, if I was going to open a bakery, I wanted to do it out of LA. I didn't want to be in the heart of Los Angeles with a bakery at that time.
And compete with La Brea Bakery.
Well, compete with La Brea and just compete with a
big
city full of people that at the time were very anti-carbohydrate.
Which I guess today is still the same in a certain way. But people
you've got a lot of very successful bakeries now in LA too.
Right. So what do you attribute the rise of...
Is that a pun?
Yes, the rise of the dough. There's a lot of dough in dough, too, I guess.
Yes, I've gone from showbiz to dough biz.
Yeah, you're in the dough biz, out of showbiz.
Repeat your question.
What do you attribute this whole fascination with artisanal bread? Is it Nancy Silverton? Is it Tartine after that?
Well, I think Nancy Silverton and Chad Robertson from La Brea Bakery and Mozza and Tartine, respectively, were pioneers in the artisan bread movement. Just, it's called wet dough, where you're not kneading the dough because you're talking 80% hydration. So the dough gets folded. It keeps your bread fresher longer. It makes it more digestible. But I think they were the parents of the artisan bread movement. And there's been, many, many successful bakeries around the country that have opened and probably attribute some of their success to them as well.
Is it coming primarily from the California world, or is it coming from the Midwest? Is it coming from the East?
I think it's coming from all over. I mean, I'm
it's a European
member of
tradition.
the Bread Bakers Guild, and there's, wonderful bread bakers and bakeries all over the country. And I think what all of these bakeries have in common is really these old world techniques, making bread the way it used to be made hundreds of years ago. Bread's been around for thousands of years. It's 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt.
It is the
staple. It's that magical process of fermentation that takes these very basic ingredients and transforms them into something wholly different.
I'm getting the high sign from Dr. D, so we're going to go to commercial, in a second. Ostensibly, what I want to know, though, is how this organization really came to be, and we're going to explore that right after we take a break here. We'll be right back with Bob Oswaks from Bob's Well Bread. I'm Will Knox on Mr. Restaurant.
Thank you.
Stay tuned, folks.
All right, you're clear. Ready for the next one?
Give me a second here.
Where are we going with this one?
We're going to go into primarily the bakery, the day in the life, the organization, and in the last. So I want you to actually show is that bread there, or is that
These are
some
pastries.
products? You know,
These are all pastries.
all pastries. Can you?
All pastries.
So we go up on YouTube, but it's primarily still podcast. So for people to see the visuals, what do you think?
Pod and video.
Pod and
Yeah,
video.
you'll
So
see it on YouTube
so
with video,
so
yeah.
Bob can, if I say to
He
Bob,
can do it a little
Bob,
bit
you brought a
slower.
few goodies with you
Yeah,
today.
But you
you know?
have to do it like Carol Merrill from the Let's Make a Deal. Exactly.
Do I
Door
stand
behind
up?
door
and-
number 3.
Do you-
Yeah, stand
do-
in front of the curtain.
Do you want a napkin? I can get you. Let me get you.
It's just everything's sticky.
All right, very good. Oh God, I still remember Monty Hall.
I'm friends with his daughter. I worked with her at Sony.
Oh
Her
really?
name is Sharon. She actually has a place right here in the Mesa. Lovely girl.
He was something else. I got to tell you, he was just like for that show. He was perfect.
Oh yeah.
Just perfect. He had really a very unique voice. I really liked his voice. Okay.
Okay, so now after this break, we're gonna have
One more.
and then on that, after coming out of that final, we'll go into your development and what's on tap. You okay with that? To talk about it? What don't you want to talk about? Because we are, in some way, not pitching, but if anybody's interested in getting involved. I mean, is that good?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, we can't necessarily do an if.
Tell you what my last meeting was about, but
Okay. All right. Good.
not on the air though.
Not on the air. Okay. Good.
Here we-
Off the air.
In 3, 2, 1.
Yum, yum, yum. We're back with Bob's Well Bread, Bob Oswaks, the founder. What a treat to have you today. And I see you've actually brought a couple of treats with you. You've
Yes,
spoiled
I brought
us here in the
boxes
studio.
of pastry. So
Boxes of pastries.
last time we did this, I brought bread. This time I brought some morning buns.
Oh my gosh. How does one person consume that?
Very lovingly.
And it takes a little while to consume it because it's a big,
It's a big
deal.
Big ass morning bun.
Yeah, that'll get you into the evening, without a doubt. How does something like that come about? Tell me how you really operate the whole concept of the operation, the organization. You're not running every single thing, are you? Or are you delegating to certain
Well,
people?
you've got to delegate.
You're a
when you get-
hands-on guy, though.
Before we opened the Ballard location, I was very hands-on. I'd, work with the bakers, baking many days, doing bagels, English muffins, baguettes, many of our breads. But as we grew, and especially because opening up the Ballard location necessitated my letting go of many things.
Because you have left staff there.
I have more staff.
Oh, you have more staff in Ballard?
No, I have more staff cumulatively. I have a smaller
Out of the two
smaller
units.
staff in Ballard because we don't bake in Ballard. Everything gets baked out of Los Alamos and driven down to Ballard as soon as it gets out of the oven at 6 in the morning.
And
No,
how
actually,
far-
5:30.
Is that about a half-hour drive?
15 minutes.
Got it.
Yeah. The way I
Totally
drive.
different trade area.
Yeah. No, it's Los Alamos is where we capture the tourism traffic. People coming off the freeway, coming to visit us, or people that make a destination. But what happened was that Los Alamos got so successful, and as you mentioned, the line out the door, which is a daily occurrence, we found we were losing a lot of the locals who drive by and say, hey, look at the line. Let's keep going.
But you're closed in Los Alamos, what, Tuesdays
Tuesdays
and Wednesdays?
both locations.
Both
Tuesdays,
locations?
yes, both
Okay.
locations are
Because that's when
open
there's really,
Thursday through Monday.
the traffic is there then.
And by opening in Ballard, we were actually able to recapture the local business because Ballard is sort of this epicenter of the valley off of a major street that cuts through the valley baseline. So you get them, you've got Los Alamos 5 minutes in one direction, San Ynez 5 in the other, Solvang 5 in yet another direction. And so it's easy for all the locals to stop in real quickly.
Because Ballard, really nobody knows about. There's only 500 people that live
Yeah,
in the town of Ballard.
very small town. It's got a chapel, a cemetery, a couple of churches,
And a
a
famous
school,
right?
The 120-year-old Ballard Schoolhouse
How cool is that?
is still in operation, and then it's got the Ballard Inn, which is also a destination property.
So for those of you who've never been to the region, it is a stunning spot to drink, to eat, to consume wine, to taste fabulous bread. So tell me again how this bread making starts. Does it go at like at 2 a.m? And also, actually, I'm really not very knowledgeable at all about most things, except maybe a little bit of business here and there. But the dough where you make all your money, the starter, the mother. What's that about? I've heard that term used, and I don't really understand the mother. And you have
They
to
call it
feed
the
the
mother
mother.
because each day you take a piece of the mother that you mix in, and
That's your formula.
yeah, that's a formula. You have, depending on how much bread you're making, you need so much starter, which is a portion of the mother that gets remixed into fresh flour, water, salt.
That's
Again,
it.
bread is flour, water, salt. The mother is the yeast component, but it's a natural fermented yeast. So we're not using Fleischmann's or the little packets that people might put into bread to make bread fast, because the yeast will activate quickly. But in this case, it's a natural starter, which is how you make sourdough. You control the fermentation by how often you feed the starter. You feed the starter once a day, and you have more of a true sourdough. And you feed the starter twice a day, and you get more of a lactic fermentation, and you have a more mellow aroma and
So it's all
flavoring.
chemistry, which I
It's
failed
all
in high
chemistry,
school.
which
Okay.
if you asked me years ago, what would I need to know better to excel and exceed in this career, I would have said math and science, because they're using algebra all day long to create your formulas. And, depending on how much bread you're making on a given day, you need to increase your ingredients or decrease them, depending on if we have wholesale or special events, or what do we need for the business to run. What are we needing to sell for 2 bakeries? So it goes up and down on a daily basis.
And this is yeast, the component that you're adding?
Well, no, bread is flour, water, salt, and yeast, but our yeast is flour and water because it's
But what you're
fermented.
feeding on a daily basis,
You feed
what
it
do you
more
feed
flour and more water,
That
and a
combination.
portion of the existing mother.
it? Okay.
So you're taking, say, 20% of the mother, and then 80% of water and flour.
And that's what's really proprietary to Bob's Well Bread.
Well, again, bread's been made for thousands of years.
Yes, but you have a certain formula. But people flock to your bread because not just the presentation of the place, which is your marketing prowess, but now you're telling me deep down you've become a chemist.
Yeah, well, it's about the chemistry, understanding fermentation. Happens at 74 to 76 degrees. So you have to be constantly aware of changes in your environment. In the summer when it's hot, you're having to actually cool your dough down. So, your flour is your flour. You can't change that. The room, you can hopefully change the temperature depending on how good your air conditioning is, or how often or not the doors are open.
And if your
And
air
so
conditioning
the
goes
big
out, you got a
variable
problem.
is your temperature of your water.
I see.
So when it's really hot, you're using cooler water so you can get your optimum 74 to 76 degrees for fermentation. And when it's really cold, you're going to use warmer water because the room is cold, and the flour is cold, and you need to get again. You have the most control over the water temp.
And this then has no effect on the pastries. This is primarily only about the bread,
Well, no, I mean,
the mother.
You do need to control your temperature when making pastries too, because you're dealing with flour, water, and butter in the pastries. So if the
A
butter
lot
is
of
too,
butter, I'd
if the
say.
butter is too warm, you won't get the proper lamination, which is the layers of dough, butter, dough, butter, dough, butter.
What is your most successful bread of all the breads you carry?
I would say our pain levain is our signature loaf. It's a whole grain sourdough, a rustic country loaf that we actually stencil the logo on.
My wife will not eat gluten. She loves your gluten-free bread.
That's good too.
She just says, I got to go to Bob's for the gluten-free bread because she can't get it very many places.
Right.
So she's got it in the freezer now. It's taken up a whole portion
Section.
of our whole section. We call it the Bob's Well Bread section.
And we'll make room for more. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm getting fat just looking at it right now. We're going to take a break and come back with Bob Oswaks, Bob's Well Bread, which is just making me really hungry. And for those of you out there who don't know, go. Bob's Well Bread, Los Alamos and Ballard. And if you live in New York, come out to California, go to Los Alamos or Ballard. You'll love these little towns, and it really is the real deal, and so is Bob. We'll be right back.
Very good. All right. So let's go on to the next one.
You good?
Yeah.
Huh?
3.
He's a natural.
Move back closer to your mic there. You
Sorry.
don't want to be too far off.
I don't.
We're barely looking at the camera, which is great.
Yeah.
So is it showing up?
Oh yeah, looks good.
Okay,
Looks
good.
good. 3,
Yeah.
2, 1. You're live.
I'm live with the live dough master, Bob Oswaks, Bob's Well Bread. I'm telling you, it's an incredible experience to go to your stores because, yes, it's retail, but it's just yummy. I mean, the breakfast I've had there is great. I crave the muffaletta sandwich because I can't get that. I think that's an extraordinary sandwich. I'm not supposed to be eating all this stuff. But, Bob, you really, turn it on not just in your bread making, but your menu, your restaurant too. So
Right.
you have a combination of a wholesale bakery or not, or is it just
Wholesale
retail?
is very minimal to our business model. It just isn't something that is required for us to reach our numbers. And wholesale is one of those things where, you're working twice as hard to make half the money. So it's not, and unless you go after it 100%, it doesn't pencil out, especially because of what people are paying and then how are they getting it. Like the wholesale we do right now, people have to pick it up. I can't afford to do wholesale and deliver it.
Well, it's kind of an experience to go to the old, town bakery, isn't it? It's kind of a
Sure.
community, thing to sit there and, have coffee, pick up a loaf of bread, get
Well,
a pastry,
and that's
schmooze
it
with
becomes like a
people.
third place for many people. It's not where you work, it's not where you live, but it's the place where you're comfortable and you can hang out and you can meet your friends and you can stay as long as you want.
So that was by design then.
Third place concept by design.
So this is back to your marketing prowess, not
Yes.
your prowess as a bread maker, but your thinking on this
Mm-hmm.
whole idea of what does Los Alamos need? It needs a third place, a destination, a neighborhood spot.
Right.
Like Starbucks would. Meet me at
Like
Bob's.
Cheers or
Got it.
yeah,
So you've been able to successfully do that
in 2 locations.
in 2 locations. Do you have a master plan to take it into more? That's a lot of work
It's a lot of work
and a lot of money.
and it requires a lot of money and it requires a lot of expertise. I'm really lucky that this business has worked on so many levels, on the level of a bakery, on the level of a cafe, on the level of a third place in 2 locations.
It's
And
charisma.
I'm not someone who grew
you've-
up in hospitality.
I understand that, but I think the thing that drew me to it was there was a charismatic aspect, not necessarily to you,
Oh, thank you.
but the brand. It somehow you're a great looking guy. I love your glasses, by the way. But ostensibly, the fact that your spot became a draw. People were talking about it. The best advertising is that word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
And people were talking about it very early on, which is a tribute to your charisma as an operator.
Thank you.
I mean, truly, it's not for everybody to turn off a highway and go into a little town and seek out this joint, but it's cool, folks. And I think the idea that you could replicate this, I believe it's scalable, but
Yes,
it
I think
takes
the scalability is there
takes good
to
manpower.
create little community epicenters along the Central Coast. Could we be in Paso, Atascadero, San Luis, and Arroyo Grande to the north? Absolutely. Could we be in Santa Barbara, Montecito, Summerland, not Ojai, to the south? Absolutely.
He says not Ojai because in Ojai there happens to be a great baker there, and hats off to Kate's Bread.
Right.
But nonetheless, there's a big world out there.
There's a big world, and there's communities, and I hear it all the time, either from developers within these individual communities or from the people that live there, like, can't you come to Carp? Can't you come to Summerlin? Can't you come to Ojai or wherever? Because they know that they and their community would welcome and support something like we've
and they're
developed.
Starved, excuse the expression, for this quality artisanal bakery cafe environment
and unique product and environment that we create. And the environments are, probably a testament to my wife and I working together to create visually the space that gets people to keep coming back, as well as our creating menus and menu items that resonate with people, and having a great baker and a great head chef and executive chef that helps us design dishes and menu items that look great, taste great, and sell out. I mean, we have maybe 15 weekly specials that we do, but we rotate them so each one gets, 3, maybe 4 times a year into the rotation. We're cognizant of special events and holidays, so when Mardi Gras is coming, that's when we bring out the muffaletta. When Easter is coming, that's when we bring out the lamb dip sandwich, a take on the French
which will
dip.
then bring people like me back because I want to know
Sure.
what's going on,
Or people
what's
just say,
new.
when you're bringing back the meatloaf, or this week was a tuna melting. It's a basic thing, but our menu has been crafted around the bread so that it can be the simplest of meals, but if the bread is great, it helps make the dish work.
Well, it's very relatable. It's not so highbrow. It's something that everybody can somehow, get their teeth into, excuse the expression.
Yeah.
I think the first time I was there, I had an egg dish that was in a jar.
Egg in a jar.
Egg in a jar.
One of our signature dishes.
I didn't know what the hell that was, excuse the expression.
It's no, it's a great dish. It's it's purple.
I'll have that,
it's
but I don't know what it is.
Purple pureed mashed potatoes mixed with Gruyere cheese, topped with a little creme fraiche, poached egg, and some bacon lardon. We give it to you with toast soldiers, which is toasted sourdough that's cut into sticks. So you dunk the stick in and get a bite of the entire dish.
My doctor loves you.
Yes.
Well, I actually love you. I must say, as a person, person who's really kind of reinvented himself in an extraordinary way. And Dr. D is telling me we got to go out in, 2 minutes? 1 minute?
Just a break.
Just 1 minute break, and then we'll come back after that?
Yeah.
All right, well, then I guess we're going to break, and we're going to finish it up with Bob Oswaks and Bob's Well Bred. There's more to talk about, Bob, so stay tuned.
Okay.
Clear, and this will be our final segment. Yeah,
So what do we got, 5 minutes more?
You got more than that if you want. I'll tell you what. Let me load this.
We're still going
I
to
keep
talk.
looking at the clock and realize it's not working.
Nah, it's
But that clock is right.
WKRP.
Twice.
He's more exact on his iWatch.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for coming in the studio.
You're welcome.
This is great.
All right.
So what do we got?
I would say I give you 10 minutes.
Well, we're going to talk still a little bit about the development. Is there anything particularly you'd like to discuss?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
All right. He does this all the time. He's kind of,
And then when you get into it, it's like
he's a regular.
comes
Well,
out.
well, it just comes out because we're just schmoozing here.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, for our final entry here with Bob Oswaks and Bob's Well Bred. Bob, again, thank you for being here. It's just
My pleasure.
a real pleasure for me, and I'm looking at all these goodies that I'm going to get into, and my wife's going to say, "No, you're not." Well, she'll let me on a little
Eat them on the way home.
graduate. Yeah, she'll never even know, will she?
Just
You know,
crumbs.
just the crumbs. You know. Speaking of wives, your wife, who I've not met, Jane, has been an inspiration to you. Is that correct?
Of course, yes.
And in this operation, was her background culinary?
No, neither of us have a background in hospitality or the restaurant industry, but we've been avid food and wine enthusiasts always. Lots of dinner parties and, parties in general and, eating out, enjoying good food and wine.
Does she bring any type of propensity to jams and
Oh, yeah, no, she
marshmallows
ma-
and
yeah,
some of those goodies?
Right,
that are
thank
in
you for
there?
the cue. No, she doesn't work in the bakery, but she works on the bakery. So, she'll do a lot of the admin things of ordering and making sure that all the wheels, are working together. But she does, some of our artisanal touches that she makes all of our own jams, and she makes all the marshmallows we use in hot chocolates. And
How'd that come about? Marshmallows.
didn't want to do whipped cream, and she started making them for fun one day, and we put them in, and just people liked having a handmade marshmallow in their
Well,
drink.
it's a very eccentric spot. That's what I think is part of its attraction. It's a real regular spot that anybody can, on one level, just say, okay, it's just a bread spot. I'll go get a pastry and a coffee. But if you really start to get into it, you'll see some of the artisanal marshmallow and the marmalade and those elements that really kind of ratchet up why it's a special spot.
Yeah, I agree, and it being that concept of a third place, it can be whatever you want it to be. So if you're just a traveler and just looking to get off the freeway for a cup of coffee and a loaf of bread or a pastry, that's great. You could be that same traveler that knows about us and you want the ham and cheese on baguette sandwich.
Oh, I was in there one day, and these guys, I was on my way to San Francisco, and I saw these guys I knew from Ojai, and I said, what are you doing here? Are you going on your way up to San Francisco? Oh, no, we just come up to Bob's for the day. They just made it a trip, and it's a good hour and a half from Ojai.
Sure.
It's a good
We're
distance.
very fortunate that we've become a destination business.
So in building that business, what's the real challenge now going forward for you?
Consistency.
Because you're behind the counter and you're in the kitchen and you're making sure that everybody's doing this, that, and the other.
I'm sort of the
Chief cook
ringleader.
and bottle washer.
So I'm trying to make sure dishes are coming out of the kitchen looking good, customers are getting the right attention that they need. We're protecting our staff and everybody in a time where there's variants of a COVID that are still out there, and some people are anxious or nervous about going in to public places. Making sure, I can look at the pastry and I can look at the bread, and if it's off on a day, I can tell that it's overproofed or underproofed or whose hands were on something to, affect its
It's that
shaping and
delicate
scoring.
that you can see it. You can't follow a certain formula of 2 minutes in and 30 seconds out.
Again, because it's all about chemistry
right.
and knowing what's going on a given day, it varies day to day. But that's the great thing about creating something artisanal. It's never going to be exactly the same. And hopefully it's never going to be tragically or, really off. But when you're making something with your hands, there's a bit of a magic to it. And every day is another opportunity to get it right or fix something that was not right. And or keep doing the awesome job we always do.
So I'm a restaurant business guy, and that's what Mr. Restaurant's about, is really tracking the business of restaurants. And I'm looking at you and I'm going, this guy could really roll this thing out. And yet it's easy in ideation, but not so much to implement.
People think it's an easier idea than it is to roll
Correct.
out. And going from one bakery to two it's more than 1 + 1 = 2, in terms of the work. It's incredibly difficult to manage two of them because you're doubling up, your front of house staff and your kitchen staff and your dishwashing staff. And this from being in the hospitality business the last several years is that it's harder and harder to get
labor
to acquire and retain quality labor. So many restaurants went under during the pandemic because they did, we're fortunate to be in a place where we could serve outside for 2 years, didn't affect our business whatsoever. Not so fortunate for other businesses.
Can you open up, let's say, unit number 3 with the bakery capacity that you have?
We could probably
Can
get
you bake
one
for
more
one more unit?
small local shop
Okay.
out of our existing oven and storage and staffing.
And ideally, where would that be? Carpinteria or Montecito? Santa Barbara?
I would see South County before North County, personally.
South County being in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, Santa Barbara,
area.
Montecito, Carpinteria.
That world.
Could be the next.
And
Don't quote me on that.
Well, I have a unit for you now.
Yeah.
Because that's a tough deal. Even if you identified, the town you want to go into, then you got to raise the money.
Then you got to
get the staff,
and how does one owner operator now manage 3 of them?
So that's the key, because you don't want to be that guy.
I can't be that guy.
I
think the business would benefit from a seasoned hospitality person to come into the mix that knows all the things that I don't, knows all the traps that I luckily avoided, most of them. But, I think that there's efficiencies and ways to operate that someone that is far more knowledgeable and experienced than I can bring to the table.
Well, if there's someone out there in podcast Zoom land,
call me.
Okay, where would they call you? At the store?
At the store, yeah.
Okay, so
We'll
go to
start
Bob's
there.
Well Bread, in Los Alamos or Ballard. Ask for Bob, okay? And
There's only one.
If you're looking for a really great gig and you're the type of guy that can operate multiple gigs, you're the guy to talk to Bob. But with that in mind, if you truly want to grow this thing, which I assume you do, you're at a point in your life where you're saying, I'm on to the next frontier. Not that I want to leave your world of Bob's Well Bread. You want to grow Bob's.
Oh, yeah, I think I want to grow it.
Right? It's a great vehicle.
Sure.
So the key here is to get an infrastructure that's really behind you. So the business aspect of growth is what's interesting to me.
Opening Ballard was really proof of concept.
And it proved itself out.
It proved itself out very early.
It's making money.
The model of Los Alamos and Ballard, where we can have a smaller overhead in Ballard because we only added a few extra people to make all the extra bread and pastry, made the business.
It was efficient.
Made efficiencies and profitabilities that weren't present when there was just one.
So now, let's say
adding a second or third, rather.
And a third will even help with that as well. There's better buying power as well, right? So having that, quote, group that already owns and operates emerging, I call you an emerging brand.
Right.
And, an ideal for you would be to have a, quote, larger company come work with you and you oversee the overall
marketing.
Not day-to-day, but the marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, and how do we take this thing and really put it on the map?
Yeah, I think that would be a good next iteration to work towards.
Is there a business plan for this already? Or is it in your mind?
I've got some things written down.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. So, again, if I'm if I'm that type of business on the lookout for an emerging brand in the artisanal bakery cafe, I'm not a wholesale guy
Right.
or gal, but I'm really a company that's on the lookout to have a unique point of view on the artisanal bakery business, then again, they should be in contact
Sure.
with you.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's a really wonderful, scalable store. I think you could open up in San Francisco. I think you could be in Paris. I really do. I think it's got the quality of this.
Can you imagine this?
Wouldn't that be great? You know, you're selling bread
I
back to
have
the
a
guys that
customer
created it.
who was in Paris for 3 weeks and was emailing me every day, taking pictures of pain au chocolat, saying they're still not as good as yours.
Well, I could believe that, but more importantly, wouldn't it be great to have that American idea of the Central Coast, California, go overseas? I think it's transportable. You could do it in Japan. You could do it you could do it anywhere. You can't, but you need the infrastructure behind you that could. So I certainly wish you well
Thank you.
on that endeavor, and I think you're certainly capable. And, you know, if you had any one person to thank in the business, who would that be?
In the bakery business?
Well, just yes, that got you into this business, that inspired you. How about that?
I would
Who
say
be
I
your
would thank
inspiration?
Norman Lear.
Norman Lear.
Who I worked for earliest in my career. Who
Now we're back to the beginning.
Back to the beginning, but he phoned when I left Sony when he heard that I was gone. And he's like, "How long have you been doing this?" And I said, 30 years. And he said, "How long were you at Sony?" And I said, 11 or 12 years. He goes, his comment was, "Over, next," meaning that life isn't about doing the same thing for 40 years, but it's about finding something else you're passionate about.
And he certainly has been an archetype for that.
Absolutely, he has in his life, and it influenced me in reinventing myself.
Well, you reinvented yourself, and that inspired me. So thank you so much, really, for your
Thank you,
time.
Will. Appreciate it.
Really are an inspiration because you have successfully transformed yourself, and I wish you nothing but the best. And folks, I'm telling you, don't walk, don't drive, run like hell to Los Alamos and Ballard to Bob's Well Bread. I'm telling you, it's a great experience. Over and out. See you
Thank you.
next time.